still get that success message. In this video, I'm going to show you the easiest way of adding Auth to your Next application using NextAuth. And I'm actually going to do this in two videos. In this video, I'm going to show you how to get set up with NextAuth and how to log in with GitHub. And in my next video, I'm going to show you how to add that user data to your database using Prisma. And I already have a Next app set up here. I did this in a previous video. It's a code snippets app where a user can create a new code snippet on this page and then view a list of code snippets on this page. It's kind of like your generic social media application, but for code snippets. So I want to add user auth to this application so that only logged in users can create a new code snippet. And when we scroll through these code snippets, we'll be able to see the user details of the user that actually created that snippet. So in order to do this, we're going to use NextAuth, which is a library for authentication in Next. And if we take a look at the introduction here, there are a couple of reasons why you would want to use NextAuth. First, it is just super easy to use. It's secure by default, has a bunch of security features that you're going to want in your application, and it's just a trendy library. So I'm going to head over to the Getting Started page, and I am going to add this to my application. So yarn add NextAuth. Let's do this. And while it's doing that, let's copy and paste the most important piece of code we need here, which is this right here. So I'm going to copy this code, and this belongs in pages/API/auth/NextAuth.js. And this is where any request to log in or to do any sign up or callbacks from our OAuth providers, this is where that code will go. So in my API folder, I'm going to add a new file, and there it is. Okay, so it's a catch-all for NextAuth here, and I'm going to paste in that code that I copied right here. And there's a couple of things to note right now. The first is that all of these code examples are going to be in the pages directory, not in the app directory. And my app is using Next 13 and has access to the new features, but the way that NextAuth works and the way that all the documentation and everything is set up is to work with the pages directory, and we're going to be using context, which doesn't really play well with server components. So in the future, I'll probably have a different video on how to do this with the app directory and server components, but for now, everything needs to be done in pages and with client components. So I've added this code into the API. The second thing to note is that we're using a provider, in this case, the GitHub provider. And there's a list of providers right here. There are a ton of them. And using any of these providers, this is like the login with GitHub buttons, login with Google, Twitter, whatever. Using these providers is super easy with NextAuth. And NextAuth doesn't really want you to have users sign up or log in using credentials like an email and password. They want you to use OAuth and OpenID Connect with other providers. And this is kind of a security feature because you shouldn't be handling passwords on your own. So if you wanted to do like an email and password login, you can with NextAuth, but it's kind of going against what they want you to do. So you're better off using one of these providers to log in, and GitHub is definitely the easiest one to use. So we're going to be using that as the example here. And before we can actually do anything, we're going to need a GitHub ID and a GitHub secret to be able to authenticate with GitHub. So to do that, we need to log into GitHub. I think I'm already logged in. Yep. And go to settings, and then down to developer settings, and then OAuth apps, new OAuth app. And here we're going to set up the application so we can get the ID and the secret. So my app is the code examples demo. All of these details right now are going to be for localhost, and I would create a different OAuth app in GitHub when I want to deploy this to production and I have a real URL. But for now, everything's just going to be localhost 3000, and my callback URL is /API/auth/callback/GitHub. So this is going to redirect back to our application, and the NextAuth library is going to handle when GitHub calls back to us. So I can register this application. That's all we need to do with a GitHub app. And then I need to copy the client ID. So we're going to create an environment variable for both of these. So I need to open up my environment variable file. And right now I have a database URL because I'm using Prisma in this, but we can ignore it for now. I just need to add the GitHub ID, which is what I just copied, and then the GitHub secret. And remember that any secrets should be secret. So don't share them with anyone, don't stream them on a video, don't commit them into Git, don't share these with anyone. Just copy it, put it into your environment variable file, or if you're deploying this in Vercel, just copy and paste it straight into there. I'm going to delete this app before this video goes live, so I don't really care about sharing this with you, but make sure you keep your secret secret. So now that I have those two in there, this file is kind of good enough right now. We can add more to this, and we will add more to this later, but for now that's pretty much, that is all we need to get set up with GitHub login. So now we can move on to client-side code. And the way that Nextauth works by default is it wants you to use this session provider. So in my app.jsx, if I go over to that, or app.js in my case, I'm going to import my session provider from Nextauth. And we're going to wrap the entire application in this session provider, which is using context under the hood, which is quite nice. It gives us some nice little features from Nextauth. Like if we have a page open where a user's logged in and we have a separate window open where the user's logs out, it will sync up the logged in state between all of the windows, and it makes it easy to grab the current user session from any page. But this isn't really compatible with server components, which is why we're going to do this all in the pages directory and not the new app directory. But yeah, we have this session provider here. We also need to do this little line of code here, which I will address later. But instead of just getting the page props, we need to destructure this, grab a session out of it, pass it in here. But again, we can just copy and paste all of this for now, and things will work. So now that I have that set up, that's kind of the boilerplate. Add that to app, add this to nextauth.js. Now we can actually start using Nextauth in our different pages. So here's an example of a login button component. I think I'm going to copy this, but I'm going to turn this into a different component. So I'm going to make, just for the example here, a new page, and I think I'm going to call this profile.jsx. So this will be, if a user's logged in and they go to profile, they'll be able to see their current profile details. So the thing at the top here, this is important, we're importing the useSession hook and a sign in and a sign out function. So the useSession hook works just like this. I'm grabbing the current session. So if the user is logged in, there's going to be a session object right here, and it's going to have the user details attached to it. So I'll be able to access things like the user's email address. But if the user isn't logged in, then there'll be no session object. So we can also use the sign in and sign out function. So I have a button to sign out if they're logged in and sign in if they're not logged in. So let's just take a look at what this might look like. So localhost 3000/profile. And all right, so I'm not signed in, but I have a button right here that will take me to the sign in page. And by default, Nextauth has this generic sign-in page, and we can change this, but it's good enough for now. It knows which providers we're using. I've only added GitHub, so it has this little sign-in with GitHub button. So if I click this, I should be redirected to GitHub, where I can authorize myself to be signed into my custom localhost application, and then it redirects back. So that is it. I already have user auth set up in my app. I can log in, I get redirected back, and I get details about the currently logged in user. Here I am signed in as my email address for GitHub. And if we take a look in DevTools and go over to application, we'll be able to see in the cookies section that Nextauth has put in a encrypted JSON web token here. So this is the details that Nextauth is using to check if we're signed in or not. So it will send this over to the server to see if we're logged in, and then we get user details like email. I think we get email, image, and name even. So let's actually take a look at this. Let's do email, image, and name. Let's just log all of those out if we are signed in. Yeah, so my email address, my image in GitHub, which is this avatar thing. Let's actually throw this quickly into an image tag. See what that looks like. Why do I keep trying to put quotes? There we go. All right, there's my avatar. Yeah, that's my GitHub profile. Email, and then my name down there. Cool. All right, so that's all the details we get by signing in through GitHub. Those are the things that GitHub provides back to us, the things that Nextauth is allowing us to access on the client. And if I refresh this page, let's see. Yeah, okay. So you can see there's a little bit of a flash there. When it first says I'm not signed in, then it says I am signed in. And that's because when we first load this page, the session object is undefined. And then it makes a request to the server to get the current session, and the server sends back these details back to the client. So our client-side code has to check with the server-side code to see if we're logged in or not. So one thing we can do to get around this little flash here is actually grab the session object in server-side props. So if I go export async function, get server-side props, that is not the code I want. I think I need to go back to the docs here, and I'm gonna go to, where do I want to go? I think configuration, yep, there we go, and then next.js. Haha. And here we have the server-side function, the server-side way of getting the user session. So we can take this function, and it says unstable at the beginning, but everywhere in the documentation it says this is the preferred way of getting the user session server-side. And if I go back to the initial getting started guide, if I go down the page to where it's talking about the server-side stuff here, backend, we'll see this being used, an example of it being used. So we basically need to import this server-side user session code, and I'm grabbing my auth actions from this Nextauth file right here, which is actually API. There we go. And then I can use this function, it's right in the docs here, to get the current session. So in get server-side props, I'm gonna grab the session, let's see, and then I can return, there we go, return that session to this component. So because get server-side props is server-side code, we're gonna grab the session details server-side and then send them to the client. And the way this hook works is that if we pass session in to the props here, this hook just grabs the session immediately from that rather than having to make another network request to get it. So this is a little bit more of an efficient way of grabbing the session details, and it means we won't get that little flash the first time I load the profile page. So let's see if this works right now. If I go back and refresh the page, we shouldn't get a flash. It should just always be logged in, but rec is not defined because it's context.rec and context.res. Okay, now, there we go. All right, if I refresh the page, we don't get a flash. It just knows that I'm logged in. So session will be undefined the first time we call the useSession hook, unless we do this in get server-side props. We grab the session and pass it in through the props here. And the way this works is because in the app.js code, we're accepting the session through the page props, and we're passing it into the session provider. And this is kind of a weird way of going about doing it, but we're mainly just copying and pasting code. And this does give us some cool features. Like I said, the user session will be synced up between all pages, and we don't get undefined for the session the first time this loads, as long as the user's logged in. Another benefit of doing it this way is that we can protect this page from not logged in users. So if I'm not signed into this page, if I just sign out quickly, I'm still able to go to the profile page, and it says I'm not signed in and gives me the opportunity to sign in. But what I actually want to do is protect this page from not logged in users. So if I'm not logged in, I just shouldn't be able to see this page at all. And maybe I'll redirect the user to the login page. So instead here, I can say that if there is no session, so if the user is not logged in, let's redirect them. Come on, I want redirect to the login page. That is not what I wanted, Copilot. Come on, do the work for me. Redirect, return. There we go. Destination, perfect. Okay, cool. So if the user is not logged in, redirect them to the login page. Otherwise, pass that session into this page and immediately see the user details. So now if I go back, immediately it refreshed and I have to sign in. So I'll just try this again. If I go to /profile, I get redirected to the sign-in page. I can sign in with GitHub, and then there we go. I'm back on the profile page and I'm actually signed in. So basically here, if you want to check if the user is signed in, if you want to get the session client side, you use the useSession hook. But if you want to get the user session, if you want to check if they're logged in server side, so this server side code here, you use the unstable get server side session function. But if you're grabbing the session server side anyway in get server side props, pass that in to the page props so that you make things a little bit more efficient. So that session is not undefined the first time. So this is how you can protect a page and get the currently logged in user's details. And you can use this hook in any component that you want because we added that session provider to app. We wrapped the entire app in that session provider. So I have my Nav Bar set up at the top here so that if I pass it a user object, it will display the user's image in this little bubble right here. And then this is a button, so if I'm not logged in and I click it, I'll be able to sign in. And if I am signed in, I'll be able to sign out. So I'm just gonna reproduce what we did there, but in my site navigation component. So up at the top, this is gonna be all client side. So I'm gonna import useSession, sign in and sign out from NextAuth React. I can use the useSession to get the current session, and the session object has a user object on it, which has the email, the name, and the image. So I have my Nav Bar already set up to accept a user object with those properties. So I'm gonna pass in the session.user, and I'm using optional chaining just in case session is undefined. So pass in the user object to my Nav Bar, and I'm also gonna pass in a sign in and a sign out function. And I'll quickly show you what it's doing here. It's just accepting a user. If there is a user object, we're gonna see the little avatar image show up. And then we have the sign in and sign out buttons just in the Nav Bar. And this simple bit of code of getting the user details and the sign in and sign out function is going to allow, no, it's not, I get an error. This is a cool error, okay. So my Nav Bar is using the next image component to display the user's profile image, and that is coming from avatars.githubusercontent.com. So I need to add this to my next config file. So let's add that next config.js, and then I have forgotten how images work. It's image domains. Oh yeah, okay, cool. I don't know what I would do without Copilot. Okay. So I have to add my OAuth provider's URL or domain here so that I can actually put that image in an image tag. So that's interesting. And then when we change the config, I have to restart the server. That is not invalid. Invalid. How do you set up the images in the config? Image domains. Image domains. I don't understand what I've done wrong here. Oh, I was reading the question, not the solution. It's images. Images domains. Okay, so now you gotta restart the thing because I re-modified the config. Okay, does it work now? Hopefully, yes. Okay, perfect. All right, cool. So now if I'm logged in, I'll see my little avatar image show up here. And then if I click that, I can sign out, which, because I was on the profile page, is gonna redirect me back here. But let's just go back to the home page here. So if I'm logged out, I should see a little basic avatar thing. And then if I click that, I can sign in, go back to the home page, and I should be able to see my avatar image again because I'm signed in. Great, awesome. Okay, so now I only want logged in users to be able to create a snippet here. So I'm gonna sign out again, and I'm on the add post page. And basically, what was the last thing okay, that's fine. If I push a piece of code here, in the network tab, we should see a 201 success message. This was sent to the server and is now being stored in the database, but I only want logged in users to be able to do this. So if I go back to the code example that I copied before, I'm basically doing this server-side code stuff because I want to protect my API route. So I'm going to take these two things, and I'm going to go over to my code. I have this posts.js in my API, This is just an API route. And I'm going to import my unstable get server-side session function in here. And then I'm going to copy how to use it because I don't remember how to use it. There we go. So when I try to post a new code snippet, it's just this little bit of code here. It's trying to add it to the database. Before I do this, I'm going to first see if the user's logged in just using this function. If there is a session object, so yeah, if session, then I am logged in, I can do that code. But if there's no session, let's guard against this. I'm going to say that you are unauthorized and send back a 401. So if you're not logged in, bad path. If you are logged in, happy path, and you send everything to the database and get a 201. So let's see if this works now. If I go back, I'm not logged in. I'm going to try doing the exact same request. And there we go. It was a 401. I am unauthorized. But if I log in now, try it one more time, I should still get that success message. So I guess that's JavaScript. Let's push that. And it was successful. Great. And that is how you can add sign in with GitHub to your Next app using NextAuth and protect certain pages and routes from being accessed unless you're logged in. So if you learned something from this video, please make sure you like it and make sure you watch my next video where I show you how to actually store the user data in the database using Prisma.